I'm going to jump right in and get started. Ben, you and I have had a few conversations here and there, but I'm excited to learn a lot more about your history and some of your story. I don't start with a lot of introduction. The introduction, they can look at your LinkedIn, they can look at a little bio that we've put out. You're easy to find out more about it if they want to look on the internet.
Sure.
But as way of introduction, I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about where your business is today. What is your business or businesses, and what does it do? And that'll provide us a little context for the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, sure. So we see ourselves as like a visual communications supplier. So to us, that means print, signage, promotional products and clothing, and packaging and labels. And so about 2.5 years ago now, we bought a print business. And then last summer, we did another acquisition of a group of sign businesses. So our business today is trying to kind of weave those together to become one kind of one-stop shop supplier for the small, medium businesses, visual communication products. We're really enjoying it. We think there's a lot of value to be created for our customers with that model. It keeps them from having to go to 4 or 5 disparate suppliers and being able to buy from one. We know their brand, we know their business, and we think that lets us supply them more effectively than when they have to go to 3 or 4 or 5 different suppliers. So there's lots of work to do, and we're still very much in the beginning phases of building that. But yeah, that is our business today. So we kind of fly the 2 brands. We have KKP, which is the print labels, packaging, and then we have the promotional products, and then we have a sign business called Signcraft that does more of the fabrication, design, installation, maintenance of the exterior signage. And there's some overlap between the 2, but yeah, those are 2 things.
And I'm sure we're going to get into a little bit of that merging cultures. That's going to be a rich part of the conversation.
It's going.
So you're actually our first conversation where it's somebody who made the decision to buy into a business that was existing versus founding. So I'd love to talk us through how that decision was made and what that was. That an active decision you were looking to buy versus found, or how did that happen?
Not kind of by accident, I guess. Like when I started my career, I knew I wanted to get into business. It was just a matter of what opportunity and when. I was open to founding something and certainly kick some tires, I guess, in that area along the way. But I kind of had the good fortune of working for a few entrepreneurs early in my career. So I worked for Danny Murphy's company for about 3 years. He's a pretty prominent entrepreneur in Prince Edward Island. And one of my first jobs at university actually was with an entrepreneur named Duncan Shaw, who co-founded an IT company at PEI and subsequently sold it and has done a few different things since then. But I got a lot of acquisition experience really early in my career, so it didn't feel as out of reach or as difficult or as complicated as it might to someone who's never done work in that area. So it wasn't. It was kind of, like I said, it was kind of by accident. I knew how to do it from my career experience, and I kind of looked at them equally in terms of a way to get into business. But when this opportunity came along, it just was a really good fit. And my business partner and I would often joke, like, you're doing your due diligence, and we would have this like running joke, like, are we buying a beeper store? Like, is this how people felt about HMV before 2000 came along? But as we peeled the onion back and learned more about the industry and learned more about the business, we were kind of like, wow, there's a lot of opportunity to innovate in what is known as a traditional industry, and a lot of opportunity to create value if we kind of shift the model a little bit or tweak it or tinker with it. So that kind of was like, no, this is a good one. Let's go for it. And it was super, super difficult to get the financing arranged because we didn't even have close to enough equity as from what the bank would have wanted, or anyone for that matter. But we did it, and we're here today, and so far so good 2.5 years later.
So you had the opportunity to work with entrepreneurial founders and scaling businesses and startup type companies, and then you bought a business. I'm wondering when, or can you identify when you actually started self-labeling with the term entrepreneur? Is that, can you actually think back of when you actually called yourself
Yeah,
that?
not that long ago, and I still kind of catch myself being like, well, geez, I guess I am an entrepreneur now. Uh, it probably only in the last year, honestly, Levi, like maybe since we did this latest sign acquisition. And I'll often laugh, like even yesterday's hiccup, right? Like that would be like I would watch these founders when they'd be like over scheduling themselves and forgetting about stuff and doing exactly what I did yesterday. Like, oh no, it's like what you say about your parents. Like when I'm never going to do that when I grow up or something like that. I'm like, my type of entrepreneur is never going to do that. Well, no, I do that too, and that's just what happens when you're trying to grow your business and scale your business. So I have had a few moments like that over the last number of months, I guess, that have really kind of hit me like, wow, like I'm doing that exact same thing that I once worked with these people that were doing. So not that long ago, I guess, but now, yeah, I'd say, probably since the summer just passed, I kind of would identify that way and introduce myself that way. Yeah.
The so for anybody who hasn't looked at your information or know of you, you have a really strong financial background, CPA,
Yeah.
and I like the conversation because I know the stereotype is that that's a very a risk adverse profession. But we've had a quick conversation on this, and I like your attitude. What do you think that strong financial management background added in value for you going down the route of owning your own business?
I think, as you and I talked once before, I I actually find it helps me take more risk because I understand maybe the risk better than someone who doesn't have the same financial training or financial background. So I can do the best case, worst case scenario, and if I'm not scared of the worst case scenario, and then if I'm not scared of even one step worse than that, I'm like, okay, well, this makes sense. Let's do it. So that's kind of how it worked for me. I think what it has done is given you a really good understanding of your financial statements and how the operations of your business translate, I guess, into financial terms or economic terms. So that's been the benefit for me. I think there's a difference between public accounting and the perception of accountants that practice public accounting and people that have financial training in general. Like in public accounting, you naturally have to be more risk averse because that's sort of the service that you're selling, right? You're auditing, you're representing banks, you're representing institutions where they're paying you to make sure that risks are avoided, I guess, or managed or whatever. Whereas when you take your financial training and you put it through an entrepreneurial lens, it's more, I'm going to analyze that risk and decide if I'm comfortable with it. I'm not trying to avoid it. I'm trying to figure out how I can manage it or get to a point where I'm comfortable taking it, or what do I need to do in my business that I would be comfortable taking it, or whatever. And so it's kind of looking at it through two different lenses. But I think the perception that's out there, to your point, like the predominant kind of stereotype of people that have accountancy training especially, is just that they avoid risk. They don't go towards it. But in my case, and I know actually there's lots of great examples of people that are chartered accountant trained or CPA trained across Atlantic Canada that have started or bought or founded some really great businesses. And actually, one of the entrepreneurs that I work for, on that note, has the exact same training that I do. Duncan Shaw is a CPA, MBA, just like me, and he founded that tech company, and just like me, he wisely let another accountant be accountant. I don't do that. Derek's happy to tell you that I shouldn't be, but that's part of it too, right? You have to there's certain jobs that are better done by certain people, and when you're trying to grow the business and run the business, you can't do the financial management too. So I'm lucky to have another CPA that works with me that handles that stuff.
So your background, both your experience working for the other entrepreneurial companies, but also your financial background, it sounds like it helped you make the decision very informed decisions in buying your first company. Your second company, was that something you were searching for to add on, or how did it come about that you decided to buy a second company within 2 years of the first?
Well, pretty quickly when we got into the print business, we were like, geez, it would be great if we could make those signs that people put outside of their, because that's like the gateway into all of the conversations we want to have with our customers. Like if you opened your business tomorrow and you're doing any type of service or and you need a physical location, you don't exist on the internet only, which some businesses do, but for those that don't, you need a sign. Everyone has a sign. So it was like that way to go, well, if we can start making the sign, like number one, most of what we're doing translates very easily to that type of product in terms of design and production knowledge and so on. And then number two, we meet these companies right away, and then we can start saying, we can sell this, and then labels, and what are you doing, and ask all the questions that we'd like to ask of our customers, and try and kind of grow our business that way. So that's really what pointed us in the direction, I guess, of the business sign fabrication. And we kind of heard through the grapevine, like through our network, that there was an older owner, non-resident owner, who, maybe interested in selling. So I just cold called, Gary was his name, and introduced myself and said, this is what we're doing, and what do you think of this? And which, as is often the case, I got the let me think about it thing. And maybe about 2 or 3 months later, he called me back and said, I've thought about it and I am interested in selling. So we kind of got the process started, and it was a little more difficult to do that deal because his financial records were not as well kept as the previous acquisition. So that's another time where my financial training was definitely an asset in terms of would have been a lot harder to get comfortable with what am I paying for here if you didn't have maybe some of the background that I did. But that being said, I don't want to kind of position that as if you need that, or like you couldn't do it without it. That's not true. I might have saved myself some professional service fees, but any entrepreneur could have, should have, would have done the deal. They just might have hired someone to do some of the stuff that I did. But it helped in that scenario too. And we started working on that before COVID, and then we were supposed to close like right around when COVID started. So obviously that delayed everything. And then you get asked the questions, and you have to ask the question of yourself, like, does COVID change this? And we said, no, like not really. It's still a fit for our business. And actually what we learned, which was kind of an asset, that business was really resilient. It was one that, as a long time sign maker said to me once, when times are good, they want us, and when times are bad, they need us, is about the sign business. So it definitely showed that it was still a business that we wanted. It was still a business that was a fit for the business model that we're trying to build, and we saw it through, and we closed last July, I think. July 1st.
So it sounds to me like you're planning, you're doing due diligence, you're learning, you're making proactive steps. It sounds like it's well thought out. When did you start finding out how challenging it would be to merge cultures? What was the first surprises that come up, or have there been any?
We knew that was going to be like top of the list in making this be successful. Like that was the number one. The money part, especially for us, myself, my partner's a lawyer, so we're good at that stuff. We know how to do that. It was like, okay, now we have 18 new people. They don't know us, we don't know them, and we want them to meet these other 32 people that we have here and make sure that everybody, gets along and thinks about this how we think about it, and we want them to think about it. So it's ongoing. It's about being around a lot, having conversations with everybody, learning about them, names, family members, hobbies, how they work. Those there's no silver bullet way to do that. But my my learning, I guess, would be you can never spend enough time on it, and it will always take twice as much time as you think, and that time will be well spent. Like, that's not a complaint. Like, you can't really overinvest, I don't think, in that communication piece and trying to align the cultures. But I think, we focused on the areas that everybody has in common. They're both making signs, like, so there was that, right? Everybody likes to make great signs. Everybody likes to make great looking, creative signs. So we kind of focused on that. And the other thing I think that has been drawing people together is now that we're a larger team, so we're about 18 people in the sign group now, we need a larger space, and we need probably some equipment that would let us do projects that we might not have had the capacity to do prior to this acquisition. So that's kind of gotten everybody excited. Like, that's kind of been our rallying point. Like, that's the other thing that I think has really helped. Like, it's a lot harder to merge cultures if I come in and say, yeah, we bought these two businesses and I just want you guys to get along because that's what I want. Like, whereas this is more of everybody's kind of bonding around this, like trying to create a larger entity that can do bigger products, more sophisticated projects, and that creates career opportunity for everybody. So we're finalizing this month, building a new sign shop in Charlottetown. So we're going to take the two shops and put them under one roof, which is exciting. There's that's just, I guess, an expansion of us trying to integrate the two cultures. We have some great people helping us with that, and one of them is one of our managers who has been divorced and remarried before. So as Mike would say, he's like, I've done the two family thing. So like, sometimes I'll like, make what I think we should do. And what do you think? Like,
I wonder if he knew that was transferable work experience.
Yeah, exactly. So it is sometimes. He's like, we got to go live in one house now, and here's what works, and here's what doesn't, and don't do that, and don't do this. So he's kind of my litmus test for good idea, bad idea.
So you have an interesting audience question. You choose to how much detail you go into, but I'm curious, or the audience is curious, did you lose any of the team members on either side as you merged?
No, and that's like probably the thing we're most proud of, and everything that's happened. Like the previous owners were like amazing people, and they'd owned the business for a long time and left really big shoes to fill. Excuse me, that way. And they're still great mentors for us. We keep in touch. I had lunch with Sean 3 weeks ago, I think. So that was the thing that we were most proud of and most nervous about, quite honestly, especially in the print business. But so far, everyone has stayed. COVID did change some things. Like, we did have someone that moved to Alberta to be with their family as a result of COVID. We had another gentleman that retired, which was per his scheduled retirement date. But we haven't lost anybody because they don't like the new owners. So that's a big win for us, or at least that's what they've told us.
So I think that's worth mentioning. You had a really great succession experience from the person who's succeeding. Any other advice on, from what you saw of the outgoing business owner, of how to make that transition, either from your?
Yeah, for us, like the guys are running a really good business, right? That's obviously why we wanted to buy it. And that being said, when you go into a company, and this would be true of any leader, like even if you were just, you're the new CEO, you run this business, don't be too quick to change things because they're not exactly how you would have done them or exactly how you want them to be done. Because as what I found, and I probably had the benefit of some just to good luck, quite frankly, of having more experience than maybe one would typically have in acquisitions going into this. But there's a lot of context that you won't understand until you spend enough time in the company to understand why it is like it is. And if you assume it's, oh, well, that was just because they didn't know this or they didn't know that, or why don't they do it this way, you'll miss a lot of context, and that's where there's really a lot of risk of pissing people off, to put it quite frankly. Like, you can change the most innocuous thing and just alienate a whole group of staff, and then like, so it's not to say, like, you can't move too slowly on the things that are going to create value for the business, but when it has an impact on the people, that's part of what I'm saying. Like, spend a lot of time, spend twice as much, talk it to death, check with everybody, because like sometimes the most innocuous things are the things that will derail like an otherwise really great project, a really great initiative that might, create a lot of value in the company. So I spent a lot of time talking to the previous owners for that reason, like getting history, or when did this happen, and why did you do that, yeah.
I got a really good follow-up question that just come in. It sounds like that's a really well-learned lesson that's really clearly valuable. Did you learn that the hard way? Did you go?
I kind of like at other owners' expense. So a couple of those entrepreneurs that I worked for previously, they did buy some things, and I would be, in a couple of instances anyway, the guy that they put in there, and sometimes it was my idea and sometimes it was theirs. So we would go in and change this or change that, and then you did kind of learn the hard way. It's like, oh my God, they moved the time clock down the hall, or just things like that, or the coffee pot's broken and they haven't replaced it. Like, it's things that are like, you can't, like, you have to be taking the pulse of the morale all the time and the temperature of the room all the time. So yeah, I guess I did in some of those acquisitions I got to be part of, like earlier in my career.
So you talked earlier about knowing that you need a person to concentrate on the accounting. You have a CPA you value that does those tasks, even though you technically have the experience to do them. How did you decide, or what did you go in as an operational role when you bought the business? What became your position, and how do you structure your involvement?
So I kind of see my role as like, we have a management team here, and I kind of lead the management team. But I kind of divide myself between that and business development, would be how I would call it. So I do sales. Like, I did a sales call yesterday afternoon. So I will take certain customers as my customers in a sales capacity. I would have people that work with me kind of administratively when I do sales calls, but I kind of call business development, sales, new products, acquisitions. We would still look at acquisitions to grow our business. And part of what fits into that business development box, I guess, is like evaluating equipment. We have a lot of equipment in our business, and it changes and evolves all the time. And sometimes to keep things growing or go in the direction we want to go, we need to stay on top of equipment advancements. So you're talking to suppliers, you're talking to manufacturers to see what they have coming out and what the latest updates are. So it's that, and then just kind of managing the managers, I guess, or leading the management team. So I'm learning this, and I'm starting to get better at this. So I'm not, there's still lots of room for improvement, and letting them, in the beginning, I threw myself into everything that I want to know. Like, I'm new to the industry, new to this company. I do have to get 3 inches off the ground. That's my personality, to figure out, like, I have to be able to at least speak intelligently about what everybody's doing. So I'm only now starting to kind of pull myself back from that and say, okay, you know what? I don't need to check every material that's in the system and make sure that it's, the price hasn't increased or whatever. I can trust someone else to do that now. So there's things like that I'm starting to give away, but keep a pulse on it, obviously. Like, I'll still check in with those folks. So we kind of have someone that runs production, someone that runs customer service. We have like a wide format lead, and then we obviously have manager of the sign business. And so those are the people that I would day to day, week to week check in and how's it going, and have our certain standing agenda items that, we'll get updates on, or, they know they can text or call me or pop in my office if something happens in the run of a day, which happens a lot in our business because we're doing a lot of jobs quickly every day. Like we probably do, 60 unique projects in a day sometimes, like from business cards to whatever, a sign on the side of a building kind of thing.
So one of them might, like from me looking outside in, there's a lot of creative elements and design elements in your company. And that's a subjective world of creativity and what is good and what isn't. So you coming in as an outside, how have you done it? Do you let the design team go with their ideas? How do you influence your opinion on their design? Like how have you worked well with creatives?
I just ask a lot of questions. It's easy for me because I don't have it. So I have no ego about that. I don't go and say, I have a better idea there. I don't. You have the best idea for sure. So I just go in there and I ask, why'd you do it that way? Why'd you do it this way? Or I think this would look cool. What do you think? And he'll say, nope, like not doing that. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Like I let the people that know best do their job. Like that's how my kind of thing. I just ask the questions. I try and tie together some of the context, I guess, of like what they're doing fits into the product or all of the products or kind of the larger organization as a whole. But yeah, I've gotten along really well with the creative folks, and I think that's why, because I'm so impressed with what they can do and how they work, and that's really what drives our business. And a lot of our customers are those types too, right? So like we work with a lot of artists, we work with a lot of marketing firms, marketing departments in larger customers, and so it's the same thing. Like it's just kind of asking a lot of questions and making sure that we're understanding what their vision for their design is so that we execute it properly. And it's a little bit of like almost project management, I guess, training there. Like make sure you have enough scope, like some of those project management basics. Like don't assume that we have all the details, and like, we proof everything to a point where probably some of our customers get annoyed, but that's why, like, we'd like to be really thorough about, is this what you meant? Because it's just sometimes, the creative types that we work with, which is a lot of people, they have a vision in their mind, and we want to make sure that that's what we bring to life in the product. And the only way to do that is to show them and say, yeah, that is what I meant. Thank you. Go ahead. So yeah, so that's the big thing. I ask a lot of questions. Certainly my experience with the Wallace McCain Institute has helped with that. Like that's a lot about building judgment and asking the right questions and stuff like that. So I'm enjoying doing that.
So one of the questions I do like to ask is, and because I like the variety of answers, you've been in this roller coaster for 2 or 3 years. What would you pinpoint as the most exciting thing that's happened, or the time you sat down and like, oh wow, I can't believe that just happened? Anything come to mind?
I think like when we get a new product or we find a new customer that we've never found before, and they are doing something really exciting, and they come to us and they say, hey, can you make this? And we're like, I don't know, that's fine. And then we go as a team, we're like, can we make this? Like, and then we kind of like, we're doing that right now with the customer I went to see yesterday. And like, that is what I get most excited about, because I feel like, hey, this is creating value in real life. They need this. They don't have it right now. We've never made this before, but we think we can. And just going through that process of trial and error and starting and stopping and, making mistakes and fixing them. And then when you bring it to life and you see your product in the real world, on a building, on a shelf, on a car, whatever it is, like, that's pretty awesome. So that would be what I get most excited about.
Not only delivering value, but literally creating it from whole cloth, which is
like we're just can you make a box that looks like this? We might, like, we'll see, and so that's I love doing that stuff.
So the follow up to that I often ask is, I've never met a business owner or entrepreneur who has it all together or hasn't made mistakes. In fact, I think that most successful entrepreneurs have just had the privilege of making more than most. If I was to ask you, looking back, the most cringeworthy or I can't believe I did that mistakes you've made on your journey, anything come to mind?
Yeah, I'm a pretty like passionate person. So even in my career, like prior to entrepreneurship, I've like I'm better at like implementing the 24-hour rule now on something, where if something happens that I just want to react to in the moment, I like purposefully stop myself now, because I have had moments in the past where I've like shot the messenger or moved too quickly on something, or I've been like, got all the way down the road and be like, oh my God, that doesn't work. And if I had have just asked like, weeks ago, I would have known that and not wasted all this time and money and effort on it, kind of thing. So I can get overzealous, so we say. So it's kind of like managing myself. Like I can't point to like one catastrophic error, but that theme has led to many other errors along the way, both in entrepreneurship and before. So I'm probably better at, well, it still happens, but I'm aware of it now, and I am better at kind of regulating it. So
I expect my team is nodding their heads right now to me, but it happens.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that when you were looking to buy the first business and probably the second business as well, you saw lots of growth opportunities or value that could be implemented into the company. Especially since COVID, what does the future look like? Like, have you moved more into digital, or are you staying with signs? Like, do you have any really big thoughts on the future?
Yeah, like we do digital printing and offset printing, and I wouldn't have thought this either, to be honest with you, but digital printing is actually what's down the most since COVID, because a lot of what drives digital in those really short runs and fast turnarounds is like events, um, like live theater, live music, things that are happening, this week, like somebody's putting it together quickly, or I want to change my menu, and then next week I want to change it again. Like a lot of people just haven't been doing those types of activities as much during COVID. But I think like where it's going, like what we've seen, and this was the trend for before COVID for sure. COVID just accelerated it. Is like, and this is what we were trying to educate our customers on. It's integrating digital and print is happening a lot more. So you start to see a lot more printed pieces that have QR codes, augmented reality, mixed reality. That is becoming more of an expectation of what like a successful print product looks like. And it's not just paper print. It could be a sign, it could be a package, it could be a label, it could be a box, it could like anything. It's really that design component of print is really accelerating a lot, and what people's expectations are, and what's the most impactful for the customer too, right? Like if you line up everything on the shelf and this label will talk to you and none of the other ones won't, like maybe you're going to pick that one for that reason. Like that's kind of where we see it going. So we're starting to invest a little bit more in the technology on the design side that you need to kind of to bring some of that stuff to life, and talk to our customers a lot. Like that's the other thing that we're really excited to start doing more of now that we're getting, I think, to the other side of COVID. We can go and ask the questions and talk to our customers and say, what do you want to see? Or is this something that would be valuable to you? So with positioning print as complementary, not, and like, I think that's one of the even misconceptions that I had even prior to getting into the industry. It's not one or the other. It's using both, like a multi-channel thing to deliver your message. So.
And even just the last 10 minutes of conversation, my head is now spinning with all the ideas, that excitement in what I would have thought was a traditional industry. I'm thinking about the wine labels that talk to you. That's super exciting, cool stuff coming down the line for sure.
Yeah, and we have there's a lot of digital saturation that COVID created, like still a great medium for certain messages, obviously. But putting something in the mail is coming back in a big way. Like the marketers call it dwell time, right? Like if you take something out of your mailbox and look at it, you get 5 times as much dwell time as a digital message delivered the same way. So you're seeing more stuff like that. You get the same phenomenons in those products. You get augmented reality, mixed reality, QR codes are the more kind of basic way to do it. You get die cut stuff, so cut to shape. You get pop-ups or things that are going to engage your audience, and that is something that we're seeing happen more and more. Like it's hard sometimes to break through the noise now in digital, especially when somebody's working from home, they're on Zoom all day, and like they just, if it's on a screen, they don't see it as much as they used to. So there are certain messages that are probably coming back to the print medium, albeit in smaller quantities. But that's another thing that we are seeing. Like we're getting some requests to do some things that I think someone prior to COVID might not have done in print because they feel like they're having a hard time reaching their audience or having the impact that they would have had because of just so much digital saturation.
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm going to change tactics a little bit. You've mentioned a few times your business partner, lawyer, and you're an accountant. There's obviously some complementary skills. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, and they've either had challenges with business partnership or they're actually trying to find. And the idea of finding a business partner and how do you, any thoughts or best practices or stories on how you came to be a business partner?
I mean, ours happened pretty organically. Like Ben and I used to work together on a variety of projects and files. Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't know. I told you that. Yeah. His name is Ben. I'm not talking in the third person. I often wonder if people think that, but I'm not. Ben H and Ben P. So we had the good, like we knew how each other worked and what our skills and abilities were. So that certainly helped. But I think my advice would be like the biggest thing for us is our values are really similar, like our attitudes towards entrepreneurship, our attitudes towards what a successful business should do in the community, how to be a good employer. Like those are the things that you really want to make sure you're on the same page about, because that's where I think anyway, there's the most opportunity to have like a pretty big disagreement down the road if you don't it's kind of like marriage. Like do you want to have kids? Oh, you don't? Ooh, I wish I'd known that. We got married. Like you don't want to have that conversation when it's too late. So those things are definitely, I would say, top of the list if you're looking to form a business partnership. Get all your values out there, make sure you're aligned. And the other thing that Ben and I did, which is Ben H's idea that we find really helpful, is we have this thing stapled to the back of our shareholder agreement called our guiding principles, and it's just for him and I. It's got no legal binding anything. It's just kind of like, okay, here's what we agree to always do for the other partner, and it's basically a list of things that and I can't recite them off the top of my head, but they're all focused around like being fair, being kind, maintain the values so if we haven't had to use it yet, but if you ever did have that moment where like you are having a disagreement about something, you can kind of go back to it and it reminds you of why you got in partnership with the person in the first place, kind of thing. So I don't know if that's unique to us or if other people do that, but I feel good just in having it, because if we ever do need it, it's nice to know that it's there. And but we get along well. Like our skill sets are complementary. That's the other reason that it works. Like I would do more of the operationally focused things, obviously, and he's got strengths that I don't have, and vice versa. So that helps too. Like we're not fighting over the same things that we're both good at, and both like trying to draw straws to do the things that nobody likes to do, kind of thing. That definitely helps. So
I think that's worth. I think that's worth even highlighting as really specific advice, because I think it's great. The like strong value alignment, diverse and complementary skills, like that combination really sounds like a powerful one.
That's the secret sauce, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So you bought a business as COVID hit. And I'm surprised. So you've navigated that challenge pretty good, and it's actually you mentioned resiliency. Is there any other like how did you first get impacted, and did you have any concerns of the world completely shutting down? How did COVID hit you as an entrepreneur versus just now in hindsight how the business went?
Like when it first hit, I was worried about all the people. Like you have a real sense of responsibility for all the people, and we have about when COVID hit, we had about 32 people, I think, and now we're up to I think 52 people. So we didn't have quite as many, but that was still enough that it was a lot to manage. And that's what we were worried about, because a lot of people that we have working for the company have worked here for decades, like 20 years, 25 years. They've never gone on unemployment in their life. And now, like in the span of 3 days, you have to go have this conversation with people, say like, okay, we're going to lay off. It's going to be temporary. I'm not sure how temporary. I don't know, like, because there's literally things that happen every hour. So that was the biggest impact to me as an entrepreneur. Like, I had a lot of personal stress about just making sure people felt supported and that they, weren't going to give up on us, because we did need them to come back. Like, what we did know is, like, well, it is going to end. Like, we are going to operate this business again, and we are going to have people in this building making products as soon as possible. I mean, it did help that we do supply some essential services, so we were able to stay open, sort of. Like, we weren't open to the public, but we did have a crew doing, like, keeping the essentials of production going during COVID. So that definitely helped. But that was the big thing. And I mean, what Ben and I did was register a plan with Service Canada so you could top up people's EI. And we didn't know how long we were going to have to do it. Like, we just, like I said, everything was happening every hour, but we were like, we gotta, like, you can't just ask someone to go home and live off 55 or 65, whatever it is, percent of their income, and not tell them how long that's going to be. Like, so we registered the supplemental benefit plan so that we could top people's pay up, so that they would be, at least their net pay would be the same. And we figured we could afford to do that for 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And then we were like, I don't know what we're going to do after that, but that'll be a decision to make in 4 weeks. I guess, like, today, like, that's the right thing to do. And then thankfully, a lot of federal government benefits started flowing the week after all the lockdowns started, and that definitely helped smooth it out. And because we were able to stay open, once we got 2 or 3 weeks into COVID, we had a better understanding of how much revenue we were still going to have. So we were able to call some people back to work, and then we just kind of gradually did that as the spring and summer wore on. But to answer your question about, like, me as an entrepreneur, I felt a lot of personal responsibility for the team. So that was where my stress was. I was not, like, we were financially stable because we had gotten off on the right foot in the business. So that part, I actually, ironically, I had very little stress at the time about that. It was about people and how they were going to do. And then, in terms of doing the other acquisition during COVID, like, we had all the due diligence done. We knew we liked the company. We knew that it was consistent and all that stuff. So the way we kind of managed that risk was we pushed a lot of the financing out. Like, we asked the vendor to hold a little bit more of the purchase price, and we paid interest only, because that just gave us more flex. We were like, okay, well, if things are really bad for longer than we think, or they're worse than we think they're going to be, at least we'll have, enough cash to keep going for however long that lasts, kind of thing, right? So we made our financing probably more expensive than we would have had we not been going through COVID, but we still felt like it was the right decision. That was one that, over the course of 20 years or however long you look at that investment horizon, that it was still going to make sense. So that's what we did. Yeah.
And turning topics a little bit, you mentioned, like, you're constantly keeping an eye out for acquisitions, and you have a strong finance background. You've seen it. We talked a little bit about, like, I believe the next 10 years is going to bring so many businesses up for sale, and the succession challenge, and it's and we've talked about, there's not really easy access. There's never going to be enough equity in the people who would buy those businesses. Do you have any advice? First of all, thoughts on that, but advice for somebody who doesn't believe, or definitely doesn't have the equity or money to buy a business, about how they approach that? Because I don't think we have enough people looking to buy for the amount of people looking to sell.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Like, it's in our lifetimes, those of us that are, younger than 40, say, or even younger than 50, you could say, like, the cost of assets has gone up so much versus wages, that no, or very rarely is someone going to be able to earn and save enough to cover the equity gap that you're going to have in buying a business. So what you often see, I guess, in the small, medium businesses is often they own their real estate and you can get a piece of financing from that. And then they might have equipment and goodwill, as the banks would call it, which is basically just how much earnings does this company generate, and will lend a certain amount based on that earnings level. But there's almost always a gap, because they'll give you whatever 75% on the real estate, or you can find some creative, more flexible financing companies that might do 100% on the real estate, but they're still probably only going to give you 75% of the goodwill equipment amount. So you have this gap always in the purchase price, and oftentimes it's made up by the vendor holding, like the seller holding a chunk of the purchase price, but it's also really tough to get them to hold all of it, because they're trying to exit their business, and there's only a certain amount of risk that some of those vendors are willing to keep. So my advice would just be to, like, that's kind of the area that everyone should think about, like, as you're evaluating businesses and what can I afford. It's like, if you assumed I might need to come up with 10 to 15 to maybe 20% of whatever a purchase price is going to be, and how would I get that? And then if you're anything like us, it's, well, I'm going to ask my family, I'm going to refinance my house. I'm going to do all those things that entrepreneurs do. But that's the amount of money that, in my opinion anyway, maybe I'm more risk averse, but yeah, that's what's truly at risk, right? Like, if something terrible happened, that's the amount of money that you have to worry about, right? Like, that's the amount of money that is that going to keep you up at night? Like, are you going to be able to live with yourself if the worst happens with that amount of money, kind of thing? So that's kind of the thing I focus on two ways, I guess. That's probably the amount of money that you're going to have to raise to close the purchase of a business. But the other side of it is, that's also the amount of money that, like, am I comfortable asking my grandmother, or do I have enough conviction about this business, and do I believe it will be, that I can make it successful enough that I'm willing to go to my closest friends and family and say, I need to borrow X amount of money, and I'll pay you back in this much time. And because if you have any hesitation about that, I would go back and look at the whole thing. Like, if you know it's going to work and you're all in, then you should just be like, no, this will be no problem. I'm certain that I'll be able to pay you back and then some. But if that gives you the heebie-jeebies, that's probably like a really strong indicator of, okay, wait, I gotta think about the whole project now, right?
Yeah, that's really great advice. I only have a couple questions left that I like to. So I'm a big reader. I'm a big podcast listener. I love hearing, but I also believe there's a ton of garbage. Like, there's probably one nugget of gold for every pile of crap. So I was wondering if you share that interest, and if there is any books or podcasts or people that you have received advice from that have really helped you along the way or change your perspective that you would recommend.
I read a book actually last month that was really good. It's called The Psychology of Money. And I think it goes to a lot of what you're speaking to, Levi. Like, it's about how everyone's influenced by their lived experience about money, right? And that's true for generations, and whether you grew up wealthy or grew up poor or in the middle, or the economic circumstances of your country or your community, or all of that influences, whether you realize it or not, how you think about money. And so for me as an entrepreneur, like, when I was reading this book, I was like, oh man, that's so interesting, because like, that really does influence your risk appetite as an entrepreneur too, like how I think about money and what I think you should do with it, and whatever. So that was a good one. I got a lot of great takeaways from that book. There's a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins that I think is really good, like, just really good practical leadership stories about, people that made really good. They're all based on larger corporations for sure, but they all are appropriate
Yeah.
for small businesses and
What I
entrepreneurship.
like
Like
about
it's
that
just
book
about
is that it's all data driven. Like it's so much research and
yeah,
source material in that it's really a
yeah,
powerful book for sure.
yeah. I also Codfathers is a book that I tell everybody about. It's great. Like it's just I like history, and it's like the economic history of Atlantic Canada from an entrepreneurship lens. And there's just great, really inspiring stories in there from people that have built amazingly successful companies that in some ways I feel like created the landscape for me to try and grow my business. Right, if a lot of these people hadn't come before me and built the things that they built, I might this opportunity that I think I have to grow a business and create value in the community might not even exist.
And you've probably
So
heard there's actually a new one by the same author. It's
Unicorn in the
yeah,
Woods.
Unicorn in the Woods. It's like the
Yeah,
new generation
yeah,
and tech exits in Atlantic
yeah,
Canada.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that book is great. It's harder to find. I have one hard copy of it, and I like lend it out to people, but I'm like ruthless in getting it back because I'll go back to it sometimes
Yeah.
and reread.
Uh,
So those are
Those are
three
great.
for
Those
sure.
are fantastic. I am actually really interested in reading about the psychology of money because I grew up on a dairy farm and I was a line cook and I was a chef, and the hospitality industry, the wages are lower. And so making the transition in different styles of business has been a challenge because of my mindset around money. And I closed a
Yeah,
business that went insolvent. And my psychology around money was adjusted again. So I'm really interested in that
yeah.
conversation.
No, you would enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's really there's a lot of good takeaways in it for sure. Yeah.
So I think I'm coming to the end of everything I was hoping to dig into today. Maybe it's chapter 1 of 2. Is there anything that you would like to share that is top of mind that maybe we didn't explore today?
I'm really glad that Pragmatic has done this, Levi. I think when you and I were getting ready and having our first kind of conversation, we talked about how just we want entrepreneurship to be seen as a career path like any other. And I really hope that the speaker series starts to initiate those conversations because that is the truth. Like I think there are risks associated. There's nothing is without risk, including career choices. So entrepreneurship shouldn't be seen as this very difficult, unattainable, or thing that is too risky to pursue or whatever. Like it is a career choice like any other, and I think more people should be considering it when they're making their career choices. And small business people in your community are just that. They're contributing members of the community with a vocation like lots of other people, nurses, doctors, social workers, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope the speaker series starts those conversations and they keep going because I think in my lifetime, that's what I would love to see more of, especially in Atlantic Canada, that more people pick up entrepreneurship and they choose it and they build things that make the community more prosperous. So thanks for putting this together because I think hopefully this will be the beginning of some of the conversations that will start that.
Yeah, and thank you. It's really like the idea was put out there, but it's the people who first signed up and said, "No, I'll tell my story." So I'm really thankful, and this speaker series has ended up being a real gratitude moment every week for me, which I think is a really healthy thing for everybody.
Awesome.
So thanks a lot. We're going to call this to a close. We are going to go down to the floor, and I do know my team's here, and there may be some Q&A if you have some time, but I'm really glad we had this conversation, and I'm excited about seeing what happens in the future. And we'll talk again soon.